probably start by giving a little bit of context to the whole Waitrose episode. The reason why I pitched Waitrose in the first place was because they just launched a brand new vegan range and they were going all out to try and attract vegan customers. So I thought they might be receptive to the idea of featuring some more plant-based recipes and articles. Obviously that wasn't the case, and I definitely didn't expect that reaction from the editor. But I also never could have anticipated how big the story became and how angry it made some people. And I did already know that veganism was a highly divisive subject, but what that issue really brought home was the fact that eating animals or not eating animals is an extremely contentious issue. And it made me wonder, what is it about veganism that gets certain people so angry? Because by definition, it's just a way of living that seeks to, as far as is practical and possible, avoid all forms of cruelty to animals. And in this country, we see ourselves as a nation of animal lovers. We're all against animal cruelty. But at the same time, we apply our own standards to it. And, we think if you kill a dog, that's abuse. If you kill a pig, that's normal. If you kill neither, well, then you're an extremist. And since that whole episode, I've been really trying to explore what it is about veganism that some people get upset about. And I think a lot of the time it comes from lack of understanding. I often hear veganism described as a food fad or the latest food trend. And I think if we look at what food trends actually are, we can see it's really not the case. Food fads are fleeting. They also have no meaning behind them. Things like unicorn bagels and avocado toast are food fads. And they look great on the plate and great on Instagram, and they're a great way of getting likes, but there's no intrinsic meaning or value behind them. And there's no thought behind them. And because there's no thought behind them, they can actually be extremely harmful. And probably the best example of that is avocados and how our hunger for avocado toast has led to extreme deforestation in Mexico. And it's devastated local communities there. But food fads are apathetic. They don't care. They don't care about ethical consequences. And for that reason, they couldn't be further removed from food activism. And the best known example of food activism is veganism. And I also think it's the best example, no bias, because it unites three very separate but important issues. And they are health, the environment, and the ethical treatment of animals. And when it comes to food activism, you cannot downplay the importance of social media. It's been instrumental in raising awareness of all these issues, and also for the massive, massive spike in veganism. I think next year it's predicted to rise by 327% in this country. And that's another reason we know it's not a fad. It's not a transient trend. It's just going to go up and up. Food activism, I think, is one of the best ways we can use social media. I think it should be used to inspire people. It should be used with intent and purpose. It should be used as a way to connect with other people in a way that actually means something to you. And when it is done in that way, and it is used for these purposes, it is such a powerful tool for driving change. And that's what food activism is trying to use it for. And there are a few separate ways that it does that. And they are all very effective in their own way, but they also have limitations when used by themselves. The first example would be environmental activism. So I think that's played a huge role in getting people engaged and getting people invested in the environment and trying to protect it. And one of the best examples of that is the campaign to ban plastic straws. Now that began and ended pretty much on social media, and what it represented was huge. But in terms of sparking meaningful change, it was actually pretty ineffective. And the reason for that is because plastic straws only amount for 0.1% of the plastic that enters our oceans annually. The main culprit is abandoned fishing equipment, ghost gear, and that is the most harmful form of plastic in the oceans. But campaigns that say ban fishing are not going to have the same impact. They're not going to get the same support or traction. And the reason for that is because for some people, that is just too big an ask. It's too big for the individual. It's one thing to turn your nose up at a plastic straw, but changing your eating habits, which sit deep in our culture and in our memories, that's quite a different thing. So that form of activism is very effective, but for a lot of people, because the issue is so big, it will work to a point. The second form of activism is animal activism. The horrors and realities of animal agriculture. I think most of us have probably seen footage of slaughterhouses, of animal abuse on social media, and most of us have probably had the same reaction, which is as soon as we see what it is, we skip past it as quickly as we can. We look away, because no one wants to see that. No one wants to see footage of animals being killed, fighting for their lives, being mutilated. It's awful. So we look away. And we bury our heads in the sand and try and convince ourselves that the meat we buy isn't like that. The animal products we buy are humane. And it is understandable why people do that, because just questioning whether something we've done all our lives, without even thinking about it really, we're just questioning whether that might be wrong or unnecessary or fundamentally cruel, is deeply unsettling. And reconciling those thoughts to the point where we actually alter our behavior and change our eating habits, that's even harder. So with both these forms of activism, environmental and animal, they can be very powerful, but for some people, because the topics are so vast and so hard-hitting, it's easier to disengage. It's easier to look away and to give ourselves a pat on the back for not using plastic straws and doing things that are smaller. And it's a defense mechanism, and it is understandable. But how can we use social media in a way that is more positive, that gets people to want to look, to want to engage? And one of the ways we can do that is with food itself. So you only have to look at the food porn hashtag to know that we're all obsessed with food. And if you can use that obsession and channel it in a way that highlights how delicious and how diverse plant-based food can be, and how easy it is, then that's something we should do. And I know for me, it was seeing photos and videos of plant-based food on Twitter and Instagram that made me realize that maybe I could entertain the idea of moving down to a more plant-based way of living. And before, I'd always felt that I was too much of a foodie to go vegan. I could never give up cheese. I couldn't imagine a life without cheese. I didn't want to. And when I saw photos of big creamy bowls of pasta or decadent slices of cheesecake or juicy burgers, it made me realize that vegan food wasn't just lentils and kale and quinoa. It was way more varied than I ever gave it credit for. And that was the first step that made me begin to look into it with a more positive outlook. And that's something that social media is amazing for communicating, the positives. And on the flip side of that, people want to look at photos of good-looking food. They want to engage with it. It's the opposite of seeing animals suffering, which makes us want to turn away and cover our eyes. This is something we can all get excited about and feel good about. Now, the other form of activism that is a positive is health. And I think the physical benefits of health have never been more obvious. You have Serena Williams and Venus Williams, Lewis Hamilton, David Hay, even Arnie now, and they're all citing their vegan diets as reason for their success, saying they've never felt stronger and faster, and that their recovery has never been quicker too. And when you pair that with attractive, popular celebrities like Zac Efron and Miley Cyrus and Liam Hemsworth and Ariana Grande, all promoting veganism online, what that's doing is slowly dismantling the vegan trope, the idea that we're all pale, malnourished, thin, dreadlocked hippies, probably unwashed, probably hugging trees. People still have that idea. And when you see people like that, it's making you realize that you cannot generalize about millions of people. There's no such thing as a typical vegan. A vegan is just someone who wants to minimize the harm they're doing to animals and to our planet. And most of us probably want to do that. We just maybe don't think we can or aren't invested quite enough. But there's another form of health that is a positive, but it's harder to communicate on social media. It's also something I had no idea even existed until I went vegan. And that's the impact it has on your psychological health. Because for me, when I went vegan, I did it almost grudgingly. I did it because I became aware of the horrors of the dairy and egg industry, and as an animal lover, I knew I couldn't support that anymore. But if I'd had known, first of all, how easy it would be, and second of all, how happy it would make me, I would have done it years ago. I can say, hand on heart, that no decision in my life has ever given me greater joy. And I think that's a really hard thing to try and convince people of, because when you think of veganism as a non-vegan, you inevitably think of the things you think you'll miss without knowing what you'll gain. And what I gained was a feeling of liberation and empowerment that I'd never felt before. When you align your actions with your morals, it feels good. You feel like yourself, or like a better version of yourself. Because most of us would admit we probably couldn't go up to a cow and cut her throat. We couldn't take away her newborn calf and shoot it in the head. But we pay people to do these things from us. And then we look away from the truth. We shrink from the reality. And when you align your values with your actions, it feels like taking off a blindfold. As cliched as it sounds, you're seeing clearly, you're not looking away, you're not shutting yourself down. You're open and you're receptive. And you're part of an inclusive community that's supportive and is all about being kinder, living more sustainably. And that's a positive. There is so much positivity and power in knowing that you are never intentionally harming animals. There's so much power in knowing that you are doing the single biggest thing you can do to reduce your impact on Earth. And I think moving forward, vegan activism really needs to try to reflect that, as well as the atrocities that are happening and the scary things that are happening, the things that are shocking but inevitably make us want to look away or disengage. But how do you convey that on social media? It's not as easy as doing a snappy tweet or a photo. It's a harder thing to try and communicate. So I've spent a lot of time recently thinking about how to best unite the key aspects of vegan activism with this idea of positivity and affirmative action and change and hope and inspiration. And I've been working on a book that is part vegan guidebook, life guide, part manifesto. And I want it to be something people want to read, something people get excited about, something that inspires them to make change, something that doesn't make them feel depressed. Because research shows that shock and fear tactics don't really work. People want to feel excited and positive. So I've called this book provisionally Yes Vegan, because I want it to, first of all, be a light-hearted book. I want it to be fun, and I want it to communicate how enjoyable veganism is, because it is. There are serious issues within it, but the journey itself is enjoyable. And another reason I called it Yes Vegan is because it is referencing the Yes We Can Obama campaign. And I'm not doing that because I think I'm female Obama, just to be clear. I'm doing it because I think that whole campaign was about change and hope and forward momentum. Well, that's exactly what veganism is about. And I think the most incredible thing about humanity is our ability to adapt and evolve and move forward and change with the times. To look at certain behaviors we've always engaged in and recognize that they're harmful, that they're unjust, and stop doing them. And throughout history, we have done some truly terrible things. It wasn't long ago that we gave women the right to vote, that we started treating black people as human beings, that we gave gay people the basic right to vote and to live in peace without fear. But with all these changes, they didn't happen overnight. There was always 3 stages they had to pass through. And we can see these 3 stages happening now with veganism. The first stage is denial. We don't want to believe it, we laugh at it, we mock and ridicule. People always laugh at things they don't understand, particularly when it involves being kind, and particularly when it involves being kind to people or beings we think we're superior to. The second stage is violent opposition. People fight tooth and nail to keep the status quo as it is. People reject the notions. People refuse to believe that animal agriculture is the leading cause of ocean dead zones, of water pollution, of habitat destruction, and of species extinction. The third stage is acceptance. And historically, it's taken usually hundreds, if not thousands of years to get to that stage. But with social media and with the internet, change is happening now. And you can see it not just online, but on the street when you go out and you can get a vegan menu in pretty much every restaurant. You can see it by the fact that Burger King have launched a vegan burger, by the fact that McDonald's are now launching one, by the fact that pretty much every major fashion house around the world is banning fur. And change is only going to continue to happen. It's going to build like a snowball and escalate, and social media will continue to play a huge role in that. And I think moving forward that food activism and vegan activism, when it's used to inspire and encourage, can not only help us solve some of the most important and potentially devastating problems we're facing, but also do it in a way that delivers a sense of empowerment and positivity and unity as well, coming together to be part of a movement that's about advancing and about kindness. And personally, I can't think of a better way to use social media than that. And I'm really excited to try and be a part of that and to try and use this feeling of positivity to inspire people and make a change that's actually going to mean something in this world. Thank you for listening.